Yeah, I think it's important to draw the connection between our military industrial complex and the level of pollution in the world. And this is one of the things that comes to my mind when I hear people trying to blame it on the individuals. Because I'm thinking, if everyone I know recycled and drove their little hybrid cars and did the best they could, and our military was still our military, then it's not going to matter what we're all doing. And so that's something to me that's one of the biggest issues with climate, and people don't understand that connection.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that, look, we've been fighting foreign wars in dangerous places to keep the oil flowing. I mean, and so there is this inseparability between, our involvement in places we shouldn't have to be and we shouldn't be, and all in the name of protecting the interests of the fossil fuel industry. And by the way, when we talk about subsidies, and of course the Murdoch media and the climate change denial lobby love to rail against any subsidies for renewable energy that attempt to level the playing field, but they have no complaint about the subsidies that the fossil fuel industry gets. And the largest subsidy of all is literally the billions of dollars that we have spent fighting foreign wars. That is a subsidy to the fossil fuel industry that is never taken into account, and the environmental degradation and damage that is never taken into account. And if we were to do a full cost accounting to account for all of that damage and loss of life, we would never be continuing to provide support for new fossil fuel infrastructure. So, I guess the lesson is these things are inseparable, and we can't separate them, but the solutions are inseparable as well. If we get off fossil fuels, then we no longer have any reason to be fighting these dangerous foreign wars that are aimed at getting a hold of the remaining, oil reserves on the planet.
And I do think that that's one of the biggest reasons why, it seems to me that the issue of universal health care, particularly Medicare for all, has really captured the imagination of tens of millions of people in this country. But part of the reason why I think they fight so hard, even something as simple as health care being a human right, which it is in the overwhelming majority of the planet, is the fact that
it should be. Let's just say it. It should.
Of course. Yeah. And once one domino falls, I think they fear that the whole thing falls apart. That's what I think it comes down to. I think they know that the second the people, this is why, again, even right now, we're not getting, stimulus checks, which is in effect a universal basic income. The second the American people recognize that they have the power, it's all over. And now it's just a matter of whether or not people are going to be smart enough to coalesce. Because I think that there's a lot of opportunity, even on the GOP side, for them to really change the way they do business. There's a significant amount of the working class that supported Trump, even though Trump is what I call the false prophet. But the rhetoric was there for actually helping the people in need. And to me, that as much as anything is what I think we can accomplish going forward. Now, is there anybody on the GOP side who's smart enough to think, man, if I just say the rhetoric, but I say I'm taking no corporate special interest money whatsoever, I have no doubt that there will be sort of this catch fire type circumstance. And Jen, I think you can speak to a relationship that you have here in Broward with a person in the Republican Party who is all about the environment, is all about protecting.
Yeah, it's interesting. We need to stop labeling people and assuming what their stance is on different positions. We have an issue here where we often will have developers that want to do drilling or fracking in our Everglades, and where they want to do that.
What could possibly go wrong, right? Yeah.
What could go wrong? We're built on limestone. See, since you're a scientist, I could just say we're built on limestone. Our drinking water is like an X of these two canals that come down. And this oil company wanted to drill right in the middle of the X. What could go wrong? So I actually made a connection in the Republican community here, and they are very pro, in where we come from, Everglades restoration.
Right.
And so anybody who's for Everglades restoration is going to automatically be against the drilling and the fracking and all that stuff.
Right.
So those are, in that case, those are my allies.
Right.
And so I just think it's important that we cross those lines. And I think that that's why, for me, I do everything on a per issue basis. And who your ally is on one thing, maybe they're not on something else, but why not work with everyone on the issues that you can work with?
No, absolutely. And Carlos Curbelo down there has been an advocate. It's a lot of those Republican advocates for climate action are ex-politicians, are no longer in office, but they are pressuring their party to be on the right side of this issue. And I do think that there are some moderate Republicans who, look, they don't want history to look back at them as having been on the wrong side of the defining challenge of our time. I do think that that weighs on the minds of some of these folks, and that they are persuadable. A lot of them aren't. And you talked about false prophets. Donald Trump is a false prophet, but he stood for corporate profit, and that's all that mattered to the vested interests, who are very good at manipulating. I think of them as sort of the ground forces, the voters, right? They need to win elections, to remain in power, they need to turn out people. And one of the great tragedies of modern politics has been the ability of one party in particular, the Republican Party, to convince large numbers of people to vote against their own interest. And they've done that through clever propaganda campaigns. So, it comes down to, again, the money in politics. You throw enough money in the form of advertising campaigns, et cetera, you can convince people to do just about anything, including voting completely against their own self-interest. And that's what Trumpism really is about. The very people who by and large supported him are the people most hurt by his policies. And so, yeah, I mean, I actually forget your original question, but I think we're pretty much all in the same, yeah.
Yeah, the importance of essentially not, again, we are a very divided country, but both sides benefit from that. That is what is most important, because corporate special interest money flows through the Democratic coffers as much as the GOP. The only difference is the Democratic side actually has a completely grassroots uprising that is happening within the party right now. Ayanna Pressley, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Marie Newman, Jamal Bowman, Ro Khanna, Cori Bush.
Yeah.
There are some really solid progressives that are in there. And
look, they've pulled, let's be clear, they pulled Biden quite a bit towards, the progressive direction, toward, the left on environmental issues, through the pressure that they brought to bear during the election and thereafter. And part of why Biden has been surprisingly bold on climate was because he was held accountable by progressives in the party. And so it works. It really does. I mean, It's so important to do. And even if, those progressives didn't get their ideal candidate, and a lot of those folks, supported Bernie Sanders, for example, Bernie Sanders and the movement behind him really moved us dramatically in the right direction on climate. And it's why we're seeing such a bold agenda. So I don't want to say we rest on our laurels, but we recognize that it does make a difference, that activism really does make a difference.
And as right now, I would say if we're being complete, and again, I don't want to overinflate the numbers in any way, but I would say if we're being completely honest about who are the true progressives that are in Congress right now, I'd say it's probably between a dozen to 15 people, if we're being absolutely fair. When the Tea Party took over Congress, they had about 40 representatives that were following that ideology. Right. Could you even imagine how much of an impact the progressive movement can have if they had 40 sitting congressional representatives? I mean, listen, it could very well happen in the next few years. It could. Because the momentum is building. People have to recognize that it is happening. And I think if we were able to get there, I mean, the sky's the limit, because you would really have you'd have an environmental caucus that was legitimate. You'd have a progressive caucus that was legitimate. And I do think that if you were to get 30 representatives, the type of impact that movement would have on the Hill is significant. Everything would have to be approved based on what they felt was applicable to get through the House and the Senate potentially. Senate's a little bit more complicated, but the House, absolutely, no question.
No, I agree. And I think we do see that, right? I mean, we're going through a cultural tipping point moment now on issues of racial justice, and that intersects, of course, with climate justice. And all of that's becoming mainstream for the Democratic Party. a mainstream position that that we have to act on issues of racial justice, social justice, and climate justice. That's become the mainstream of the Democratic Party, and that wasn't really true, a few years ago. And so, again, I think that there's clear evidence that that pressure really does. It does move the center of the party in the right direction. It isn't just, the people who might be in the progressive wing of the party and their immediate influence. It's how they are impacting everybody else within the party, moving the whole party. And that's what the Republican Party has been so effective at doing, where we've reached a point now where Ronald Reagan would have been primaried. If he was a Republican senator, he would have been primaried as a left, a rhino, a left-leaning rhino. Today, Ronald Reagan wouldn't even find any place in today's Republican Party. They have been very effective.
Blend in with like Joe Biden. He'd blend in lovely with the current central Democrats.
Honestly, you look back on Reagan's legacy, and I still say that the thing that he did that hurt this country more than anything else is that he crushed labor. And when he fired the air traffic controllers in the summer of '81, it broke the labor movement, and it essentially forced the hand of the Democrats, who then ultimately started the third way, the DLC, as you know, and then it became
corporate money,
the corporate party. They decided that banks were more important than labor.
They
unions.
weren't getting money from labor unions because labor unions were completely neutered, and so they started taking corporate money. So it kind of all stems back to.
But that whole thing about the environmental movement right now, I think a lot of it is being done in conjunction with a sort of a resurgence in the labor movement. I do think that is what is coming. This just something as simple as pushing the envelope on the $15 minimum wage. Everything in many ways, as far as I can see, is interconnected. And you've been following this, I'm sure, for a long time. A lot of these things, it's almost like a perfect puzzle. You remove one piece, the whole thing falls apart, but you connect that other piece that needs to be there, and everything can come together. Like I said, that's why I think the establishment fights as hard as they do, because they know as soon as the people get a taste of what it's like to actually live in
a civilization,
it's over. It's over. It's just a matter of when it happens. And I think as long as we have individuals like you, and again, we're speaking with Michael Mann, his book is The New Climate War, and it is going to be one hell of a fight, because even though the Democrats are in charge, they take corporate money too, but we are moving the needle.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.